My name is Charles Malky, biologist and plant expert with Ivory Organics, where we grow cool plants. And today I have the privilege and the honor of presenting in front of about 30 to 40 members of what's called the California Rare Fruit Growers. Check this out. This is one of their magazines right here from the California Rare Fruit Growers. And they've just recently added a YouTube link where they're going to be doing a lot more educational videos from their website. But in this presentation, I'm going to be talking about the importance of the use of Ivory Organics, as well as talking about plant evolution, native plants, fertilizers, propagation, both sexual as well as asexual propagation, and just talking about some of the pros and cons of some of these methods for propagating plants. I hope you enjoy this video. Why it flowers and blooms the way it does, but we'll address that in a minute too. But I'm glad I'm going to be able to add one more new idea for you guys when you visit your avocado trees in your garden. Plant evolution. I'm going to wait for you guys to get those in your hands. And here we go. Earth. How old is Earth? Yeah, it does depend on which Bible you read. I know, it's true. So according to the scientists, Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Plants, so 4.5 billion. When did the first little single cellular plant show up on Earth?
200 million years ago.
200 million? 300,000 years ago? So Earth is 4.5 billion years old. A billion years later, the first plant cell existed. So now we're at 3.5 billion years ago. So it took a billion years to get one plant cell on this planet. The early plant cells included algae, euglena, protozoans. When it comes to air and the oxygen we breathe, we know the importance of plants in our environment. And this one, I want to hear and see your hands on this one. The oxygen in our air, does it come predominantly from the trees in our gardens and in the forest and whatnot? Or does the oxygen come out of the ocean? Thoughts? Okay, let's do a show of hands. I'm going to ask both the questions. Does the majority of our air come from the trees on land? Trees on land? And then how many of you say it comes out of the ocean? So the answer is the ocean. The ocean is where the majority, I think it's even in the 80s or 90 percentile, like huge percentage of your oxygen in the air comes out of those, again, single cellular plant cells that are floating on the top of the ocean. Those things are making more oxygen for you than all the forests and trees in the jungles. Again, it's all important, so keep planting your trees on your property. But I just want you guys to know that the ocean, and again, I guess that the value of living near the ocean is, as you guys do here in Culver City.
You're saying humidity?
No, not humidity, oxygen.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Just oxygen. You're getting more oxygen from the single cells floating on the top of the ocean than you do all the forests and jungles and on land. And then plants. So now it's 4.5 billion years ago, the formation of Earth, 3.5 billion, the first cell, and then the gymnosperms, which are like the dinosaur, plants and trees, evolved about 300 million years ago. The gymnosperms are the cone-producing plants, such as carnivores, and another one I wrote is sago palms. The sago palms are more related. You guys all know what the sago palms are. The sago palms are more related to the coniferous trees, and they're in the gymnosperm family and not in the same family as other palm trees, such as your Washington fan palms, your pygmy, palm trees. Those are angiosperms, which come next. But again, your sago palm trees are in the coniferous family, evolved 300 million years ago. And then 200 million years later, being now 100 million years ago, we get the angiosperms. The gymnosperms consist of only about 1 to 5,000 species of plants, whereas the angiosperms, which evolved more recently, again, only 100 million years ago, the angiosperms consist of over 200,000 species of plants. 200,000 evolved recently compared to the older gymnosperms, again, 1 to 5,000. Such a huge difference. The angiosperms, what makes them unique is their flowers, being one example. The flowers of the angiosperms typically have both the male and the female parts within it, and we're going to talk about that in a second. So most fruit trees, the flowers, shrubs, grasses, all of those, angiosperms. Modern human, when did people show up? And I'm not talking about the monkeys, but there's actually, quote unquote, modern human is like the way some of these people define it, being, you know, the upright, I guess less hairy men and women. How old are those? How old are those people? The modern human. When did we show up on planet Earth? Guesses? So 120,000 years ago.
Millions of years after the cockroach.
A million years after. Whoever said 120 years, 120,000 years, that was close. There's research that says 200,000 years ago for modern human, and then the civilized human came about 10 to 20,000 years ago. So, I mean, oh, we're still evolving. So, but the first civilizations were only discovered somewhere between, you know, some research said 10 and others said 20,000. But it just shows like our footprint on Earth, and we always hear it. But when you think about like your plants have been here for, just looking at angiosperms, a million years ago compared to people civilized 10 to 20,000 years ago, and the impact we're doing on everything that we see around us, it's just mind-boggling what people have done to planet Earth. The other thing I want to talk about in regards to evolution is the natives. So the angiosperms, which are your flowering plants and your fruit trees and all of these other, you know, grasses that you have on your property, are all from 200 million years ago. And with it, they evolved with the insects and the birds and the hummingbirds and everything else that also existed to help pollinate it and to facilitate its perpetuation, you know, from generation to generation. The goal, and I know a lot of you here have heard, and I think it's been, marketed or publicized a lot in just the last 5 years. Has anybody been an avid native plant grower for more than 5 years? So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you guys had these concepts. I feel like the movement has become great in just the last 5 years about the importance of having native plants in your garden. I dedicate, I would say, of my property is on a 5,000 square foot lot, but my garden space is definitely less than 1,000 square feet. Of the 1,000 square feet, I fit about 25 fruit trees. And again, of that 1,000 square feet, I'd say at least 100 to 200 square feet are dedicated specifically to native plants. It doesn't take the way of any of my fruit trees, but I do have within it my California poppies, my sage, the bluebells. I've got any color you want. And the intention and the goal with having your native plants in your property is that you're attracting all of the natural wildlife that exists in your area to come and visit you. I've been teaching this within the Hollywood-Knolls for about 2 to 3 years now, where I'm trying to get as many homes to get native plants into their properties. And the goal is you're creating islands for these native insects and birds to then travel from one home to the next home. And by planting your native plants, you're creating the foundation for then the entire ecosystem, which includes, we already said the bees and the insects and all that other stuff. And it's not, I know there's another project being specific for monarch butterflies, but it's not just the monarch butterfly that needs your help. There's hundreds of species of butterflies that will benefit from you planting your native plants. And then different kinds of flies and different kinds of, you know, all pollinators that will enter your property and then pollinate your fruit trees, pollinate your vegetables, and you'll reap the benefits of more success by supporting your local biology. And then the food chain, again, it starts with the plants, but it works its way all the way up to, in the Hollywood-Knolls, we've got P22. Does anybody know who that is?
Yes.
The mountain lion. So, no, he did get sick last year from people using rat poisons and stuff around their property, and that toxin built up in his system, or it's a him, right? Yeah. So, but the goal is, it's the whole circle of life. It all starts with your backyard, and so that's the importance of making sure you've got natives in your property. Other benefits of native plants, I'm just going to race through it. The first one being is there's over 6,000 species of native plants that you can shop from. So there's a huge diversity of plants. Most people think I got to plant California poppies. They're beautiful, but it's not the only plant you can consider. Drought tolerant, low water requirement, colorful and beautiful, erosion control. No pesticides, no fertilizers. If you're putting pesticides, even neem oil on your native plants, that's a huge mistake. Neem oil is an organic way to keep pests off your plant, but your native plants are designed specifically to say, eat me, use me. You're creating habitat, which is life for the other insects in your area. So when you see a caterpillar eating up your native plants, the goal is you're supposed to leave it to turn into that butterfly and continue doing what it's supposed to do. Your other plants, on the other hand, like for example, my citrus, which I have scattered in between, those I will treat with neem oil, for example. But again, I'll keep my native plants in an area that's nowhere near the base of these because the oils will contaminate those areas. And again, even though I'm doing things organically, you're killing the life that you're trying to hopefully support. Native plants create habitat, and that's something your lemon tree, for example, will not do. Yes, it's offering food to the bee, but it's not a home to the bee. Your native plants create home for insects that are dependent upon those plants. So an important reason to have it. No fertilizer. Native plants evolved here 200 million years ago. They grew without fertilizer. They don't need your help now either. Support your local habitat, wildlife, and then maximize the efficiency within your garden. You get pest control natural again. It'll also bring additional predators that will take care of pests. For example, when I see aphids on my citrus or roses or whatever else, wait, like don't race to spray just because you see a few aphids. Who's going to feed the hummingbird? You know, aside from the nectar that the hummingbirds eat, they do eat those aphids. Who's going to support the bees if you're killing the aphids? Not the bees, but the spiders and the ladybugs and all these other things that are waiting for those prey to show up in your garden. You need to have some bad in order to have the good. So be very careful with your use of pest control also, and especially around natives. Like it's absolutely forbidden. Any questions on plant evolution and native plants? Having fun so far? Cool. Fertilizers now. Is NPK enough? Does anybody think, I'll say, assuming that you guys don't know, but I know you guys know this, N, nitrogen, P, phosphorus, K, potassium. Are those three macronutrients enough nutrients to support plant health? Anybody? Yes? You don't want to stick up your hand? So I pulled up this chart from University of Wisconsin, where they actually say that there's more than three what's called macronutrients. When you buy any fertilizer from your nursery, you're only looking at those three numbers: nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. And it's in that order, as I wrote, NPK. If you wanted to grow really fast, then higher nitrogen. If you wanted to flower and bloom more, then a higher middle number. And if you're looking for more disease resistance and root structure and health, the last number. So according to, and I've learned this also way back when, but the University of Wisconsin published that there's in fact 6 macronutrients, which are your 6 most important ingredients to make sure you have in your soil for plant health. In addition to the 3 that we just mentioned, and actually I'll put it in order of what they say for those of you that are taking notes if you don't write it. But nitrogen, as we expect, potassium, so that's the 3rd number they put second, is potassium. Calcium is number 3, magnesium is number 4, and then phosphorus, and then sulfur. That was the order of plant needs, highest plant needs for the macronutrients. And then the micronutrients include chlorine, iron, boron, manganese, zinc, copper, molybdenum, and nickel.
Where did you say that?
I pulled this list off of wisconsin.edu. It's like the University of Wisconsin that published this. It's not on my website. It's on their website. I'll actually leave this here, or you know what, you can have it. Who wanted it?
Well, why don't we pass it around and put on the
So I also brought with me the periodic table of elements. There's 118 elements. How many of you have used fish fertilizer in your garden?
What fertilizers are?
Fish fertilizer?
Absolutely.
So, and fish emulsion. And I wish I had more time to go fishing, but when I did, I would never let my fish go. Either my dad eats it, and I'm not a fish eater, I've tried. But my dad would eat the mackerel, that had cats, the things that nobody else would eat off of Newport Pier or Huntington Pier whenever I fished. But if it was big enough, he's like, I'll eat it. Carp in the lake, give it to me with all those hairy, hair fine bones in it. Dad loves fish. I don't know why I'm the exact opposite. But with fish, if my dad didn't eat it, it all went into my property since as far as I can remember. I don't even want to say I was 10 or 11. I think I was even younger than that, burying the fish. But it wasn't until about the last year that I realized that adding fish into your garden is about half of the periodic table. So from the 118 elements, you got about 60 elements in your soil by just adding fish into your garden. So you're putting fish pieces and chunks around the plant. I usually bury it a few inches below, water it in. I'll take your question in a second. But ultimately what you're doing is, I've got all this, product around my plant, but how does it get into the plant? And ultimately the answer is it's your soil biology at work here now. It's going to be the earthworms, the nematodes, the beneficial bacteria. Everything's eating it and turning it into those atoms and molecules, the elements of your periodic table that'll then work its way into your plant and offer the plant the nitrogen, the phosphorus, the potassium, the calcium, and all of the things that would otherwise be in that fish body, and then put it into your plant. Yes, Brad? And then I'll take your question. Yes. So Brad was asking, did you say, how do you or do you? Do you? Yeah. So for foliar spray, and this is important to consider doing, like starting now, spring, summer, even fall. And then there's something else I do also in the winter, so I guess there's something to do every season of the year. But I don't just simply put fish, like when you get that product from your nursery where it's liquid, I usually add that to my compost tea. So I've always got some active compost in my property, which is made out of all the kitchen scraps and Starbucks coffee. Does anybody get their coffee grounds from Starbucks?
They quit giving them our stuff.
When I usually call in an hour or two, as early as I can in the morning, and I'm like, I'll be there in 2 to 3 hours. All of your coffee grounds are mine. I take a trash bag at a time. So that takes a good percentage of my compost bin. The leaves that I can find at Griffith Park or whatever, my daughter and I will rake leaves, and we basically make a combination of leaves, grass, coffee, kitchen scraps, and all of these ingredients. The goal again is I'm creating something that's got a lot of elements in it. And at the end of the day, what I'll do is, aside from maybe scattering some product around my plants or with the tomatoes that I planted, and this is a process that on my property, just because I've got so much shade, and especially where I've got my compost pile. And again, usually the warmer it is, the faster it'll break down. But this product, it takes me an average of about 6 months to make. I start it usually in the fall, and I get to enjoy it by spring. And I've been doing that every year for as long as I can remember. But what I'll also do is I'll take a couple of handfuls out of it. I'll add some organic molasses to it to further feed the microbes that are in the compost. We're talking, I see somebody taking notes, but maybe a tablespoon or two of sugars to feed the bacteria and stuff within the product. I'll then add the fish fertilizer. I'll add a couple other ingredients if I think it'll be beneficial, but it's all broken down stuff that have, again, the bacteria and the fungi and everything else that I'd want. And then I'll add a bubbler at the bottom. I think I got it from Petco for about $5 or $10. And I'll put a bubbler at the bottom of the 5-gallon container. And keep in mind again, there's only probably an inch or two of product in this 5-gallon container. And then with the bubbler at the bottom, it's just mixing all of this life in there. And then I'll use that as a foliar spray on my plants, because now it's got all the elements of the periodic table, or a lot of them. Probably gold's missing. And I'll then use that as a foliar spray. And the benefit is, again, you're returning all of these nutrients to the leaf, which will then absorb all of those elements and make them readily available to the plant. In addition to, it helps also combat pests. If you've got an issue, I always have citrus on my mind, but citrus, what are those fuzzy white things called? Scale. So by applying such a foliar spray to your plants will also result in competition between the beneficial stuff in your spray to the pests that are on your plant, and help try to keep things in check as well within your trees. So that's kind of how I use it. I don't use just fish fertilizer. I try to mix it with more stuff to get more elements when I take the time to do a foliar spray. And then there's another question.
The fish, do you ever put fish in your compost bin?
No.
What if it works in the ground? Why wouldn't it?
Yeah. Great question. My compost bin I treat strictly vegan or vegetarian or whatever. even though I've got a lid on it and it's covered in holes and whatever else, and stink-wise, it's far enough on my property, I don't think it would cause an issue, but most people won't put meat into their bin specifically to keep rodents and raccoons and other things from wanting to get into it. But yeah, it's entirely possible. Yeah.
Could you confirm something? I've heard that sugar is good for nematodes. I mean, it kills them or something.
Nematodes?
Or it clears them out. Can you?
So adding sugar, if you've got an issue with nematodes in your property, he's asking would sugar help control it. Does anybody here have an opinion on use sugar, right? Like sugar water to the soil.
Something to do with root knotting.
Has anybody ever done that before? My experience and in addressing sugar, adding sugar directly to the soil, and I just mentioned adding like molasses to that 5-gallon drum a day or two before adding it. And keep in mind also, the living organisms within it will consume the sugars. I'm not adding sugar to the soil. And one other idea I want to share as well. It sometimes might make sense, the plant is going through the process of photosynthesis and making those sugars that the plants need to then grow and do all the things that it does. You would think that maybe adding sugar to the soil will help facilitate getting those sugars into the plant. And for one, that does not work. If anything, you're going to cause disease and problems in the soil by adding sugar to the soil. That's not feeding or doing anything beneficial. If anything, I would say it's going to be more detrimental. In regards to controlling specifically nematodes, I would say, I don't have an opinion on the sugar, but I would say a better way would be to do a neem drench, like where you'd add a tablespoon or two of neem to a gallon or 5 gallons of water and use that to basically, what it's going to do, it's going to kind of wipe out a lot of the soil biology. But if you see that it's something you need, I know there's other people that have, they say ant issues around their fruit trees. I don't see why it would justify to just go and wipe out their populations or bring them down. But that's another use for neem oil is to just do a drench, and it kind of wipes out everything that's around the tree if you think that it's an issue. But again, I'll take your question in a second. But again, it's just something you got to use your judgment on. Is it something I really want to wipe out, or is the tree going to be okay? Kind of like the aphids on your plant. Like, wait, don't just take them off. Sometimes you wait a week and they just disappear because something else has cleaned them up. Yes.
There are beneficial nematodes you can add to the soil, which take care of the nematodes you don't want.
Great point.
Beneficial nematodes.
That's very good.
Yeah.
Market, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of nurseries.
New orange just opened up.
Where is it?
So if you've enjoyed this educational video by Ivory Organics, be sure to like it, and most importantly, by subscribing below, you'll be connected to all of these other educational videos. Thanks again for watching. Happy gardening.